Hey, it's Kim from Not Consumed. I'm so glad you're here today. It is week one of our Contentment challenge, and I'm so excited to share with you today some tips for parenting through your needs and wants discussion with your kids, and also for having this needs and wants discussion with yourself, even as an adult. So that's our topic for today on Contentment Week, or Contentment Challenge Week number one. I'm glad you're here. To get started today, I would love for you to share something you wanted as a child, preferably a toy. Like, it doesn't have to be a toy, but something you really, really wanted. Was it a pony? Was it a, Tickle Me Elmo doll? I don't know. Like, what is something that you remember as an adult really, really wanting? I'll tell you what mine is. I love music. Like, music is just the thing that makes me happy. And I wanted, and I probably don't even look that old, but I wanted a radio with a cassette player. That was the thing. And I was actually in high school before I actually got this thing. But anyway, I wanted that so badly. And it's so funny just to think that cassette players, like, kids don't even know what those things are anymore. But anyway, I wanted this cassette player so bad when I was a kid because I wanted to play that music. That was kind of my number one want. So share with me what your number one thing was, or the thing that you remember the most. It may not have actually been your number one thing in the comments, because I want to hear about it. If you're just joining us, as I mentioned, it is Contentment Week number one, and we are going to be talking about needs and wants, and we're going to talk about some tips for your kids. I have 3 tips to share for working with your kids on this topic, and also just some encouragement for you as you work through some of your own needs and wants. So I was the kid who grew up with the JCPenney catalog. My grandma loved JCPenney. She had the catalog on her coffee table as growing up, as long as I really can remember. And I loved going to her house because I would go over there and I would sit down and I would thumb through the pages and I would look at all the cool things in there. And I would like dog ear all this good stuff. I would get out a big Sharpie marker and circle all these things that I wanted. And it's funny because I can remember some of the things that I circled that I wanted. And they were really interesting things, like, bed sheets and towels for the kitchen and stuff. And I was a little kid. So they were interesting wants in my case. I think that for me, what I really enjoyed so much about the JCPenney catalog wasn't exactly like, I need these things, and if I don't have these things, I'm going to be happy. What I enjoyed was just looking at them. I can say that because as an adult, I actually enjoy going to the store and just looking at stuff. Like, I like to think about ideas and I like to explore stuff, and I love window shopping, especially like old quaint villages of towns and things like that. Love it. It's just fun for me to do. Sometimes it creates this sense of, oh, I want this or I need more things, but usually it's just something that I enjoy doing. So why do I bring this up? Well, this is important because often when we deal with our kids, when it comes to needs and wants, we're real quick to say, you don't need that, and let it go. And we even are tempted as parents to tell them, stop asking for things. You can't ask for anything, which is also a little bit harsh. Harsh because if you don't let your kids ask for anything, how do you know what's in their heart? How do you know what they want? How do you know how to deal with the fact that they want something that they either need or don't need or whatever? Like, there's no teaching opportunity if we're kind of shutting it down. So I'm glad that I got to look at the JCPenney catalog when I was a kid, and I'm glad that I sometimes still window shop and like to do that kind of thing so I can deal with that stuff in my heart too. And I'm glad that I learned that lesson so that I am not squelching my kids, but I'm giving myself the opportunity to talk to them. So 3 talking points for dealing with your kids about needs and wants. The first one is we absolutely have to define the terms with them. Now, that probably seems obvious, especially to most of us who grew up learning about that kind of stuff in school. They're not teaching that stuff in school anymore. Our kids don't actually know, well, what is a need and what is a want? What are our basic needs? So if you haven't personally had this conversation with your kids, start there. Start by talking about what is an actual need and what is an actual want and how are they defined. And sometimes those are physical things. Sometimes they're not physical things. Like, I want to have a father, or who lives with me, maybe. Or I want to have a sister and I don't, so it's not always a toy, but just helping them to understand, well, I don't actually need a sister, but I might want that. Or I don't actually need that cassette player, but I might want that. Wanting is not a bad thing. We're going to work on that in point number 3. All right, point number 2. Once you've defined your terms and you've helped them to understand needs versus wants, the next thing we're going to do is fix our language. Okay, so this is partly your fault and partly their fault. And so when you go into the grocery store and you say, hey, we need some Oreos. Do we need Oreos or do we want Oreos? So be careful the way you say things so that you're helping them to understand how they're saying things too. So when they get to the gum aisle and they say, I need some gum, you can remind them, actually you want some gum, or you want those Legos or whatever. I just remind my kids of this all the time. It comes up all the time, but it's a great reminder to us all, if we're going to get to that place of being content with what we have, to help us to understand, oh yeah, that's a want. It can wait. Now, the third point is probably the most important, at least it's been the most impactful in my family, and that's to put all of your wants on a list. So when we get to the store, usually not the gum aisle, but, if we get to Walmart or whatever, and my kids say, hey, I really want that Lego set, I quickly say, great, take a picture of it. You can write it down on your wish list. And that does 2 things. One, it validates they have a want and I'm listening. I'm not just shutting down all of that stuff and saying, whatever, I don't care what you want. But second of all, it teaches them what I think is the best strategy for helping us as adults even, that everything that we want can be we can validate that. We can say, oh, I want a new dress, I want new earrings or whatever, but then we're going to write them all down and then we're going to revisit the list. Now, when I revisit the list with my kids, this is when it becomes the most powerful because they see, oh, wait a minute, I don't want that anymore. And so you have an instant lesson of, aren't you glad we didn't buy it and waste our money on it right there in the store in that moment? Because sometimes the things that we want, we don't actually want as much as we think. So writing them down is a great way to come back to them later and realize, I actually do want this thing. And it's something that might be worth spending money on. Because we do get to have our wants sometimes. They're not like evil or anything. This is also really helpful, just for the record, with your family members who, I don't know about you, but all of my family members are always like, what does Johnny want for Christmas? And, it's like, I don't really want to ask them at Christmas time because at Christmas time they become hungry little monsters. And so I have this great big list that they've been, maybe not great big, but, I have this list that they've kind of created over time of all these things that I didn't buy them. That they have said they want. And so they can go back and they can visit that list if that's what we choose to do at the time, or they can just, I can just give that list to the people who are asking. So that's pretty helpful. Now, let's get to the adults. So we talked a little bit about kids, and if you're just joining us, by the way, I would love to know something you wanted as a kid. That's your question for today. So drop that question in the comments. We'd love to hear what you wanted as a kid. I asked this question in our Facebook group yesterday. We got all kinds of fun answers, and I was surprised at how many people said pony. But I shouldn't be, because I have one of those children who wanted a pony as early as she could talk. So, okay, we talked about kids. Let's talk a little bit about adults, because we have a tendency to be really hard on our kids about the needs and wants thing. And then we figure, well, we've conquered this. I know I don't need Oreos. I know I don't need a new dress. I know I don't need new makeup, right? I want those things. I get it. I'm working on my budget or whatever. So for us, most of the time, it gets a little bit deeper. Let me tell you a story. About 5 or 6 months ago or so, not super long after Luke was diagnosed with cancer, I was standing in a kitchen. And it had been a really long day. We'd been at chemo all day. I was tired. Luke was really sick. And, I didn't even really know what the other kids had been doing all day. And, I just, the stresses of the day were catching up with me a little bit. I was trying to cook dinner and I was trying to open the spaghetti sauce, right? The stupid jars that just won't open. And so I'm like trying and I'm trying and I'm trying, and I have a complete meltdown over the spaghetti sauce. Every trick I was trying, including we have these gripper things, was not working. Could not get the spaghetti sauce open. So I literally kind of fall apart. I start crying and I say out loud to no one in the kitchen, I need a man to open my spaghetti sauce. Now, if you know me, know that I'm a single mom. And sometimes I fall into this I need a man trap, right? Being very transparent with you here. And, I just totally fell apart over this spaghetti sauce and this man thing. And, later that night, God and I had to have a little talk about how I did not need a man, and I did not need that man to open my spaghetti sauce. And I did actually eventually get it open as soon as I set it down and calmed down. And so I just want to encourage you today as a mom, even if you're not a mom, if you're a dad, if you're a student, if you're a ministry worker, whoever you are, there are a lot of things in our life as we become adults that, seem like they would be okay to want. Maybe it is a spouse. Maybe it's your kid to get better because they're sick. There's so many good things like that. But we have to remember that God is only and always good. He has actually given us exactly what he wants us to have. Exactly. To a T. Everything he's given us is exactly what he wants us to have. I think of the hymn, Great is Thy Faithfulness, and the line, all I have needed, at all, every single bit, all I have needed, thy hand hath provided. God has given us everything he thinks we need right now. I hope that really encourages you today, whatever you have. If it's, not enough in your mind, it is enough, and you are enough. And I look forward to joining you. If you're not a part of our challenge and you're not getting the emails, there was an email that went out Monday night is when we're going to send those out. Be sure you get on the list. I forgot to drop the link in. I will do that at the top. And if you want to email us at kim@notconsumed.com, we'll send you a copy of last week's or this Monday, a couple days ago, of that devotional. Basically, the idea behind the devotionals is to give you some encouragement and then give you some talking points of some things to do with your kids as you go through this week. And I will look forward to seeing you next week so we can be content and live not consumed. Bye, guys.